We'll call this meeting of the Clackamas County Commission to order and invite you to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on our agenda today is a proclamation of proclaiming October 2011 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I believe that's why we're perhaps all wearing these little pins.
Yeah,
But
didn't put mine on.
many of us in the room are wearing these little pins. But I will turn this over to Christina Bondurant, perhaps is how you say your name. I'm not sure.
That's great. Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you so much for allowing me this time to speak and for your strong commitment to domestic violence prevention and intervention. As you know, domestic violence is a serious crime that impacts our community at every level, from individuals to families to public health and the local economy. Interpersonal violence crosses all racial, social, religious, ethnic, geographic, and economic groups. While important work is being done locally to address domestic violence, it continues to be a pervasive and ongoing issue. In order to help raise awareness about this issue, Congress passed Public Law 101112 in 1989, declaring October of that year as Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and similar legislation has passed every year since then. Nationally, an estimated 1.3 million women are victims of physical assault by an intimate partner each year. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention reports that intimate partner violence results in more than 18.5 million mental health care visits each year in the United States. In the state of Oregon, 35 deaths were related to known intimate partner violence in 2009. And you'll notice in the room we have two silent witnesses, which we'll be displaying around the county throughout the month, and they represent two of those folks whose lives were lost in 2009. In that same year, there were over 8,309 allegations of abuse or neglect towards seniors and people with disabilities who are not living in facilities. And in cases where the perpetrator was identified, 45% of those allegations indicated that the perpetrator was an adult child, a family member, a spouse, or an intimate partner. In Clackamas County, 28.8% of founded abuse, neglect, or threat of harm referrals to DHS Child Welfare were related to domestic violence in 2010. Clackamas Women's Services is also in the room today, and I'm going to invite someone up to speak for them a bit, and they'll have some more local statistics as well. The Children, Youth, and Families Division is actively supporting and developing evidence-based programs and initiatives that work towards addressing and preventing domestic violence in our community. Our goals are to raise public awareness, increase safety and support for survivors, and hold those who abuse accountable for their behavior. We're committed to a collaborative community response and work very closely with the Family Violence Coordinating Council as well as the Domestic Violence Leadership Committee here at the county. Some of the projects currently underway include specific campaigns to raise awareness during the month of October, including a kickoff event in downtown Oregon City a week from tomorrow. That's Friday, October 7th. It's in the plaza next to the courthouse from 5 to 8 p.m. And we'll have speakers and music and food, and we'll be displaying the silent witnesses as well as the Clothesline Project then and throughout the month. We're also launching a new website next week, the first week of October, featuring information and resources related to domestic violence. We've received new funding through the Department of Justice Office on Violence Against Women to enhance training and services for women experiencing violence later in life. We're launching a countywide public awareness campaign focused on prevention in the coming months. And we have contracts with several local agencies and departments to improve services to survivors, including the implementation of the lethality assessment program at the Sheriff's Office, which has been really successful. And we're doing an ongoing assessment of systems responses to domestic violence in the community in order to strengthen any gaps in services that we're seeing. And finally, of course, very thankful to the Board of County Commissioners for having the foresight to support these efforts with the $500,000 grant opportunity that's out right now. And I would now like to invite Kristen Schlotterbeck up to say a few words. Human Services.
It's on, but it's not. Could be the audience.
Hi, my name is Kristen Schlotterbeck. I'm the Prevention, Education, and Youth Programs Manager at Clackamas Women's Services. CWS is the primary agency providing services to domestic and sexual violence victims in Clackamas County. In 2010, we received 5,514 crisis line calls and served 5,504 participants in our shelter. In our outreach services program, we serve 150 families with transitional housing, counseling, advocacy, and support groups. In the past several years, since we began surveying youth in our community, a consistent 50% of them have said that they've known someone who's been in an abusive relationship. CWS addresses this need through youth groups and presentations to an average 250 elementary, middle school, and high school students in Clackamas County. The need for prevention and intervention and ongoing support in our community is great. I started over a year ago at CWS, and I have not seen an empty bed in our shelter for more than several hours, and the same goes for the rest of the Tri-County area. We would like to extend our gratitude to Clackamas County and the Board of County Commissioners for your ongoing support to raise awareness and end domestic violence.
Thank you. Any questions? Here.
Well, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your service, and I think it's fitting that we have in the room right now, Christina, who's done such a tremendous job trying to help the county be the best partner we can possibly be to organizations that help families who are trying to escape from violence. That we have you on behalf of Clackamas Women's Services, and that we have John Foote, who just gave the keynote at the Children's Center breakfast, which also helps families that are dealing with abuse and violence. These issues are so intertwined, and they're so important, and I think it's great that we are able to focus at this moment on the fact we need to be more active and supportive as a county of the important work that you do, and thank you for kicking us off into Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and please let us know what we can do to be of service to you.
Thank you.
At this point, if there's no discussion at the moment, I would ask Christina to read the proclamation.
Proclaiming October 2011 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in Clackamas County. Whereas domestic violence is a serious crime in Clackamas County that affects people of all races, ages, gender, and income levels. Whereas family is the foundation of a safe and healthy community, it is the goal of Clackamas County for our communities to be safe. Whereas 5,837 shelter nights were provided to domestic violence survivors and children, and 2,899 calls for service for domestic violence survivors were received in our county in 2009. Whereas 28.8% of founded abuse, neglect, threat of harm referrals in Clackamas County were related to domestic violence in 2010. Whereas children that grow up in violent homes are believed to be abused and neglected at a rate higher than the national average. Whereas the economic costs of intimate partner, physical, and sexual assault in Oregon are estimated at over $50 million each year, including $35 million of which is for direct medical and mental health services. Whereas only a coordinated community effort will put a stop to this heinous crime. Whereas Domestic Violence Awareness Month provides an excellent opportunity for citizens to learn more about preventing domestic violence and to show support for the numerous organizations and individuals who provide critical advocacy services and assistance to victims. Now, therefore, the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners do hereby proclaim the month of October 2011 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in Clackamas County. We encourage all citizens of the county to join us in this observance and urge everyone in the community to learn more about domestic violence and how to address it both individually and collectively.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
would entertain a motion to adopt this.
I move we
proclamation.
proclaim October 2011 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in Clackamas County.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Savas and seconded by Commissioner Bernard that we proclaim October 2011 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in Clackamas County. Is there any other discussion on this item?
I just wanted to read a quote, if I may.
Yes, absolutely.
So, I subscribe to a listserv called Season of Nonviolence. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, but what it means is every day I get a little a quote sent to my email. reminding me about how to be a peacemaker in that day and reminding me what it means to work in a nonviolent fashion. And I just wanted to read you the quote that I received a couple days ago because I thought it was very apt to what we're doing today with our proclamation. It says, "Anyone can be graceful in the face of justice. However, it is how we behave when the world seems unfair that tells the truth of our character."
If there's no other discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And that passes unanimously, and this will be Domestic Violence Awareness Month in Clackamas County.
And I agree with Richard Langdon that we should clap.
And I would love to get one of those pins.
Oh, absolutely. We'll get you one.
One in your check.
Was there?
Yeah.
Oh, I never got that far.
They're in the office.
It's in the mail.
The pin is
Thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us to our discussion items, and we have up for discussion our approval to accept the Honest Opportunity Probation with Enforcement Demonstration Field Experiment. Lord, what a mouthful. Fiscal year 2011 grant award, and I believe we have our District Attorney, John Foote, here to explain this extremely long title.
Good morning. It's nice to be here. My name's John Foote. I'm the district attorney here in the county. And before I do that, if I could just say, I wasn't planning on saying anything about Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but just to put a word in for CWS, I think it's an important partner for those of us in public safety. And, a lot of different ways you have to attack domestic violence, and you need the services of CWS as one of the pieces to do it. So, and there are a lot of people pulling on the rope. And we've made a lot of progress, but there's still a lot to do. It's a very difficult subject. It gets right into the heart of families. Moving on to HOPE, probation. If I could, first of all, thank you for putting this on the agenda and maybe give you a little bit of background about it. I never used the whole title because it was created to read that way so it would be HOPE. And it comes out of actually Hawaii, a court in Hawaii that I stumbled onto about 4 years ago. A judge there just got frustrated with the way they handle probationers as ineffective. And quite frankly, those of us who've been in the business a long time, when I read why he was frustrated, I thought, yeah, he's right. And he just decided to junk the way he was doing it and do it differently. And he had a heck of a time getting everybody else on board, even though he was a judge. Most was it law enforcement, because when he told them what he wanted to do, they thought, well, our jails will be full and we won't be able to handle it. And he said, well, trust me, let's try it. And so he did it. And I'll explain what he did in a minute. But it was so successful and so simple that it finally somebody evaluated it. Some researchers out of UCLA and Pepperdine, whom I happen to read what they do and think they're really good independent evaluators. And so that's how they tipped me onto it. And then it's since been studied very carefully, and the Department of Justice discovered it, the U.S. Department of Justice, and created a grant opportunity for 4 test sites around the country. The idea is these 4 test sites part of the package would be for a really, really rigorous kind of evaluation that isn't done very often. Randomly selected groups, all the things you need to make sure it's really valid, is part of it, and all 4 sites would be tested. And that we got picked as one of the 4 sites. When I saw the grant opportunity, I thought the only way I could convince my partners here in the county to try it was to bring the judge to Clackamas County to talk to everybody beforehand, because he's so good at explaining it. So we did that, our office. And Sarah Brown, who's here, who's our office administrator, was really very instrumental in helping me do this. And we flew him here and gave him a half day with the court, community corrections, people from the jail, defense bar, and human services. Cindy Becker was there, the whole crew. Gave everybody lunch. and let everybody talk to each other and let the judge talk to them. And it really worked because he can explain it. Let me try and simply explain what it is. When somebody's put on probation, they're given things they're supposed to do as condition as probation. Don't use drugs, show up for their appointments with a probation officer, et cetera, et cetera. One of the ones basic is don't do any more crime. But there are a lot of other things too. It could be drug and alcohol treatment, could be drug testing. And the way it's done in many places is the probation officer monitors the behavior and tries to work with the person, and it actually is quite forgiving about, okay, you messed up here, we'll give you another chance. So by the time it actually gets to a judge, there have been a lot of missteps. And he thought that was sending all the wrong messages to the probationers about what the rules meant. So he completely flipped it and said, first time they miss an appointment, first time they get a failed drug test, first time we go out and get them. And we bring them in, we put them in jail for 2 days, and then we let them out again. And that happens every time. And he had to set up a lot of things to make it work. And you obviously need people in the jail, and you need people in community corrections all buying into this because they have to go out. They're the ones who go out and get them. And that's why the people in the jail thought, well, this will just overwhelm us. But the result was just the opposite. The failed appointments, the bad drug tests, all of that stuff disappeared. It's really startling. And now, you still get some people who mess up, and they do take the spots, but the overall effect on the jail and community corrections is at least no greater than before, and the amount of failures is a fraction. And we're helping people succeed. We're changing behavior. So it sounds very simple, but to change the system like that is hard because it involves so many partners. That's really what we've bought into. And it takes the leadership of the court. Judge Steele here in Clackamas County has gotten very excited about this, is going to be the leader of it. Community Corrections is on board. The jail is on board. And we did this in tough times because the carrot is we got $846,000 over 2 years to do this. The money is going to go to some extra court staff, extra community corrections probation officers, too, and extra resources for the jail. And we are going to do in-kind contributions from our office because we think we can do it with existing staff. What I keep telling people, these aren't new people. These are the same people doing it differently with better results. I'm absolutely convinced that if we can do this right, it will work. And in the long run, it's the model. It's the way we should be doing it. But it takes real commitment by the court to really talk to people who are on probation the right way and to be very consistent all the way down the line about what we mean. And it really does, I think it works. So that's the grant we've gotten. It's 2 years. We'll not only do this, we'll be able to get all the evaluation to see how well it worked. And then hopefully, if it does work, it's going to help us. In Hawaii, he's expanded it to all the probationers in Hawaii. He's supervising it, a couple thousand people. So, and he thinks you can triage then. And I mean, once you start getting people to pay attention, you can sort the ones out who have more serious problems, and maybe residential, less serious. I mean, you can much better identify why the behavior is the way it is, and use your resources more appropriately. Anyway, it's very rational, and in criminal justice, that's always sometimes that's hard to sell. Change is hard. But I wanted you to know about this. I'm cautiously very excited about it. And we've got a lot of work to do to make it work, and it's going to be a real partnership. It will only work if the partners buy into it. So that's why I thought it was important we bring the judge out so that they could hear it straight from the person who's done it. And I think we're going to have a trip to Hawaii for the people that are going to do it, so they'll get to see him again in sunny weather. Anyway, not we're going to pay for it, the grant pays for it. So I wanted you to know about that, make sure I can answer any questions you have. When you hear the word Hope Probation, that's what it is. We start next month. We're going to have 200 people in the program and then another 200 randomly selected outside, and they'll be tracked to see out of the same cohort, if you know what that means. So I I think it's really good practice, and I think it's the way to go, and I think it's using resources smartly, and hopefully resulting in better behavior by the people who are under supervision, and no more resources. So,
I think Commissioner Bernard has a question.
Well, first, I'd like to say, great. I look forward to seeing how this works out, but there's a big difference between Hawaii and here. Here, you just go to Multnomah County, Washington County, or another county, and there's never really been that big, they don't connect that well. So if somebody goes to jail here, they leave the county, they go to the jail there, that's not necessarily tracked, it's not counted. So is there some sort of tracking that would be included in this grant process that would actually, of course, if they leave the state, it gets more difficult. Hawaii is an island. You can't swim away, take a boat or a plane. But this is a little bit different. So that was my question.
Commissioner Bernard, members of the board, that's a really good point, and yes is the answer. We are going to track all of it. In fact, the kind of evaluation that we've bought into is extremely rigorous. The definitions of what recidivism means is much more strict. For instance, in Oregon, recidivism is a felony conviction within 3 years. You can have 50 arrests. You can have 50 convictions for misdemeanors in Oregon, and you have not recidivated under the definition. In this grant, it's being arrested. So missed appointments are going to be carefully tracked. The thing that's the tether is the court. When somebody's put on probation, they're on a tether to that judge. It doesn't matter where they get arrested. If they get arrested on a warrant out of that court, they go back to that court. It's the string. And so there is a connection no matter where they go. And we're going to be more rigorously evaluated than typical because these things, the evaluators who are doing this are very serious about trying to be as accurate as possible, not necessarily about proving it works, but about, if it does work, really proving it works, if you understand what I'm saying, rather than sort of buying in that it works and then setting an evaluation up that kind of proves it, which unfortunately happens a lot.
Yeah, I'm on the
my
State
opinion.
Board of Community Corrections. So,
No.
I mean, when the statistics came out that Oregon was one of the best, all of us kind of disagreed with that recidivism rate, which because they don't track it properly. So the big argument is, what is that definition?
Absolutely. And if I can just tell you a magic moment that happened at that lunch. Community Corrections, Chris Hoy, good guy, well-intentioned, very dedicated to what he's doing, turned to the judge at lunch and said, well, I'm just really worried because your recidivism rates are worse than ours, and I'm afraid ours will get worse. And I knew the answer, of course, but I knew that I couldn't be the one to answer it. So the judge turned to him very calmly and said, well, how do you define recidivism? And he said, well, he sort of mumbled, well, new felony conviction within 3 years. And the judge just laughed and said, well, that's why your recidivism rate's low. That's just too loose. We do it by arrests. And they not only do it by, recidivism is crime, but they track missed appointments. They track bad drug tests. I mean, it's very rigorous on the things that they're ordered to do. So that's why being successful, I think here, if we are, we'll know it works. That's the hope, and hopefully if it works, other people will get interested in it, and we can show it to other people. So.
It sounds like I'm really excited about this as well. I think it has a lot of potential. Is this a match grant or not?
Well, we
Is
have
there
the
some
match
match?
is there is a match. Our office is one of the matches, and there are some others too.
Well, in-kind match?
Yes, yes, and we count this is all done, and Sarah's got all the information if you want it. But one of the ways we made it work is our office didn't need any of the money, so we were part of the match because we figure it's the same people, just doing them differently.
Yeah,
And so,
thank you. Any other questions?
I just have a comment. So I went to the Restorative Justice Conference and listened to two recovering felons as a part of the Delancey Street program in San Francisco. And one of the things that struck me about what they said that helped them turn themselves around was this sense of this larger accountability, and that as adults, they had really they'd never had anybody when they were kids tracking them or helping them learn about this accountability, and they had to learn it as an adult. And so a lot of what I think that you're talking about is kind of compassionate accountability.
Yes, absolutely.
It's these things that folks haven't learned, which has led to them making these poor decisions. And so I really like this program. I'm very excited about it. I think it's quite innovative, and it does marry up with what I heard from these felons of, it's like, wow, once we realized people were paying attention to us and tracking us and holding us accountable for what we were supposed to do, we cleaned up our act. We started performing. So I think this is what the intention of this program is. So this is exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Damon. I could talk about this all day. Just to comment on that, the researchers that are doing this believe the research shows that what changes behavior the most is the certainty of being caught. If somebody believes that someone's paying attention, the whole revolution that went on in New York City about the crime rate was all done with what's called broken windows theory, enforcing all the little stuff. Not with draconian sentences, but holding people accountable. And so this really is based upon that very same principle. And this judge believes is that it sorts out the people who can change without more resources, who don't need necessarily drug treatment. And so the resources, the group that you have left who are struggling, you can target them better because you've sorted out the other group. And so you can not only have better success, you can use the resources you do have more intelligently and targeted on people who need more. So anyway, as you can tell, I'm a big believer, and we'll see if we can make it work here.
John, I just want to acknowledge, your efforts and your hard work. I've really learned a lot in the last, 9 months as I learned all the different things that we do and the intertwine, as Commissioner Leininger pointed out. I like the innovation. I like the progressive efforts that you're making toward the proactive efforts towards solving some of these problems we have in our society. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for your support. We'll try and use the money wisely.
With that, I would ask for a motion to
Discussion item. Announce if anyone wants.
accept this. Unless anyone else would like to speak on this item. I don't have any cards about this item.
Richard wants to say something. He said he wanted to speak. You mean from the public?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, anyone can speak.
You looked at me, Mary, like,
I just
no,
didn't have
no.
any cards signed up for this item.
I didn't know that I was going to have an opportunity. Richard Langdon, you know my address from many previous times being here before this body. I want to do nothing more than say, fantastic. This is the sort of thing that we need to see in government. I just can't tell you how exciting it is to see this. Good job.
Thank you. And then I don't have any other cards, so at that, I would ask for a motion to accept this grant award.
Chair Lehan, I move we accept the Honest Opportunity Probation with Enforcement Demonstration Field Experiment Fiscal Year 2011 Grant Award.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Damon and seconded by Commissioner Leininger that we accept this grant award, which I will not read the title of yet again. And if there's any other discussion, Commissioner Bernard.
I just actually have a little comment. One of the problems with having a low recidivism rate is that when you do a good job, they cut your money. And so actually having a real rate could be very valuable. And so for me, that's one of the most important things is that we really keep track, we understand that, and we actually reflect the reality. And if the reality's bad, it tends to bring more money. If the reality's good, then we don't need as much money. So that's what I appreciated about it.
If there's no other discussion, then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously, and thank you very much for the presentation. And we will look forward to hearing more as the program gets underway.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And that brings us to citizen communication, and I have Yvonne Lazarus.
My name is Yvonne Lazarus. I live at 2063 Southeast Torbank Road, Milwaukee, Oregon, 97222. Why did I ask Commissioner Bernard to recuse himself last week? I'll be clear on the matter. Excuse me. If light rail is built, the financing for the lines requires all property owners in the South Downtown Urban Renewal District to accept rezoning. In my opinion, he is compromised. For this reason, I asked Commissioner Bernard for the third time to recuse himself and hope his co-workers will encourage him to do so. His property is on the corner of Washington and 21st. Commissioner Bernard, this has not been easy for me. If I didn't truly feel this in my heart, I wouldn't ask you. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next one I have is Les Poole.
Good morning. Les Poole, you've got my name on file. This is an interesting time for us all, and I didn't get up and speak on the previous issue, but the thought that came to my mind is how many of these domestic violence cases are at the hands of probation violators. There's a connection between this month's proclamation and District Attorney Foote's effort to tighten things up. One reason that I know how to behave in a meeting, boy, there's a hot subject, and one reason why people like Yvonne or Richard or the rest of you are not routinely on COPS is that we probably had some guidance and accountability when we were young. One of the reasons I can get up here and speak is that somebody cared. I had the meanest 7th grade English teacher you can imagine, and I love her to this day. I mentioned to Mary on a light note that you can't beat Oregon in September, and it's too bad we can't leave the curtains open right now. I've been at every meeting since early June. I apologize for missing last week. You'll probably continue to see me, and you'll probably wonder why. But you don't wonder why very long. I think you really know why. I'm speaking for lots of folks. I'm speaking for a majority that's rising from the silence. And I hope that you all appreciate what that means. Brief comments about the draft for rules of conduct at the meetings. I think the draft has a lot of good points, but it mentions that the citizens shouldn't be asking questions. Well, the citizens should be asking questions. They shouldn't necessarily expect an immediate answer or response. If I ask a question right now, how's the weather, Paul? He doesn't have to respond now. He doesn't have to respond at all. But raising questions is really part of communication. And hopefully we won't see any infringement on the ability for people to come down and communicate with you. I think if some of the issues were handled differently, you wouldn't see some of the actions that you see. And I also believe, I'll close with the thought that people need to be silent when others are speaking. but in between, a little show of expression is certainly appropriate. I think I timed that pretty well. I'll share a 10-second quote that I got, an email that I got referring to Jamie, and I think Mr. Savas will appreciate it. And it's got a lot to do with what's happening today. It says, if you rob Peter to pay Paul, Paul will always vote for you. Thank you.
Okay, the next card I have is Richard Langdon.
I've been looking at this all morning. It wasn't anything important. Good morning. My name is Richard Langdon, and thanks for the endorsement, Ann Leniger, with regard to the clapping for that wonderful item voted on this morning. Yeah, it's needed in our community. My address is on file from many previous times being here, as you know, and I sent out with regard to this communication document that has been produced. I sent out an email last week. I haven't heard a response on, and there are 3 items that were in that email that really the citizens of Clackamas County should expect an answer to 3 different questions. And I'll ask Jamie Damon those 3 questions. They're reasonable questions that really need to be answered for the citizens. The first question is this document a suggested behavior document, or is it a binding rules document?
Citizen communication is for you to testify to us. We don't do back and forth questions. You can raise the questions, and then either the commissioners or staff will get back to you afterwards. So go ahead and raise all the questions, but we don't do back and forth. That's citizen communication.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, and Richard, I will try to address some of them in my commissioner communication at the end, if I can, if I have the answers. Otherwise,
I'd like
we
an
can
answer
follow
now,
up.
but let me continue on with these questions, and it'll make clear that there's a refusal to answer the questions. And it'll be on the record here, which I expected, and the citizens expected that. 3 questions are real simple questions that these answers are available right now, and you've interfered with simply having an answer for them. One is this a suggested behavior document, or is it a mandatory rules document? Simple question, easily answered, but you have not allowed anybody to answer that question. Thank you, Charlotte Lehan. Yes or no on this one. This is real simple. Will the rules in the document interfere with citizens' right of freedom of speech? Yes or no? I'm waiting for an answer.
And I already explained that we don't do back and forth in citizen communication, and there is good reason for that. And we don't do it on any topic. It is a time for you to address the commission, and we will get back to you in a timely manner.
The third question. These are very simple. This is pathetic. Will the rules in the document prohibit the asking of a question by a citizen? Of course, that goes right back to, will the rules in the document interfere with citizens' right of freedom of speech? Yes or no on that question, once again. The citizens have a right to know these simple 3 questions in this document.
Are you finished with your testimony?
No, I still have 2 seconds. I am done now. Thank you.
Thank you. And that brings us to, I don't have any other cards, so, and there's no one else here. So That brings us to the consent agenda, and I will have the clerk read the consent agenda by title.
Madam Chair, I need to be excused. I have a commitment at 10:45. I need to meet.
Okay.
Okay, the consent agenda. Under Health, Housing, and Human Services, approval of Amendment Number 1 to the intergovernmental agreement with Oregon Health Authority for the Adult Mental Health Initiative. Approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the State of Oregon Department of Human Services for the Ticket to Work program. Approval of an intergovernmental agreement with Lincoln County for the Citizen Alien Waived Emergency Medical Children's Dental Services Expansion Program. Under Elected Officials, approval of previous business meeting minutes. Under the Development Agency, approval of an Oregon Parks and Recreation Department local government grant agreement for the construction of Hawthorne Park. Under Service District Number 5, board order certifying an assessment role for Clackamas County Service District Number 5. Under the Water Environment Services, approval of a joint funding agreement between Clackamas County Service District Number 1 and the U.S. Geological Survey for cooperative hydraulic monitoring of the Johnson Creek watershed, and a board order approving an increase to the loan from the Clean Water State Revolving Fund for Clackamas County Service District Number 1, North Clackamas Revitalization Area Sanitary Sewer Project. And that concludes the consent agenda.
I would entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
Madam Chair, I move we approve the consent agenda.
I second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Bernard and seconded by Commissioner Leininger that we approve the consent agenda. Are there any comments or discussion on any of the items in the consent agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 4-0 since Commissioner Savas has had to leave. And I will remind people again that all of the items that were read by title are on the screen showing where you can access the full document, full agenda item, and background materials if you have an interest in any of those fascinating items. And that brings us to Commissioner Communication, and perhaps I will start with Commissioner Damon.
I have some questions to answer. And I'm sorry that Richard left because I wrote them down and I do want to answer his questions. So just a couple things about these guidelines. If you look at the first panel on the inside, it says, what rules am I expected to follow as a speaker and audience member? And I think this is what Richard was alluding to is like, are these mandatory rules? How do we enforce them? I think that's what he was getting at. And really, these are ground rules, if you will. In the world of mediation, it's very common, for meetings to have a set of ground rules, and they are really good faith rules that try to create the environment that we would like, that we think is a good working environment for all of us. So mandatory to the point that we hope that people will adhere to them. And if the meeting becomes disruptive or unmanageable, for the chair, then it's the chair's discretion to enforce the rules so that people on all sides have an opportunity to share their viewpoint. So it's not so black and white, as it's more. They are more guidelines, advisory. They are what we hope our meetings will be. So that was the first one. The second question is, will these rules infringe on freedom of speech? And the answer is unequivocally no. We had our county council review these, and we've talked extensively about these as a commission. This is a business meeting that we're trying to affect, and these are the guidelines that we hope will create a respectful environment. So no, we're not looking to infringe on anybody's freedom of speech rights at all. And in fact, in some earlier drafts, there was some language in here about restricting shows of emotion. And that was something that we said, no, we want to have shows of emotion. We want people to be able to express joy or sadness. We want those kinds of emotions. So we took reference to that out. And the third question is, will the rules prohibit the ability to ask a question? And actually, when Mr. Poole was testifying, Commissioner Bernard leaned over and he said, yeah, that's a good point. Because really, it's true. People, when they testify, should be able to pose questions, but it becomes quite challenging for us to have a conversation with the folks that are testifying. The format for a business meeting isn't the format to have a discussion or a conversation unless they are part of the agenda, as a discussion item. And so, so I think the challenge is, and if Commissioner Slavos was here, I know he would want to chime in. I think the challenge is for us to create more and more forums to be able to have that back and forth dialogue and not expect that that's all going to happen here in our business meetings. So I hope that answers Mr. Langdon's questions. And I also just want to let people know that on Saturday, I'm going to be presenting at the League of Oregon Cities Conference in Bend. And I've learned that I have about 120 people coming to a session that I'm doing, which is really talking about rules of decorum in county and city council meetings. And so I expect to have a robust conversation with city councilors and from across the state as they've been grappling with these issues as well. And this document is a draft, and so we're looking for all kinds of feedback. So, I look forward to that conversation on Saturday.
And I would just add to that as you're pointing out, citizen communication can't be a back and forth partly on a particular topic, partly because we are constrained by the rules of open government, which says that items have to be noticed. When we're meeting as a quorum, then it has to be noticed. If we're going to take up an item under citizen communication and have a rousing discussion about it, it has not been noticed. So other people who might have also been interested in hearing or talking on that topic have been effectively shut out. So that's why it proceeds as it's a one-way opportunity for citizens to testify on anything from soup to nuts, and then some of those items might then rise to the level of, we do want to take that item up in a future meeting and put it on the agenda. Or we might deal with it in another way. Staff can address it individually, or one of us might address it individually or something. But we are constrained also by the open meeting laws in getting into things that are not noticed on the agenda by topic. And then I would also point out, as Commissioner Damon said, that a lot under Robert's rules is at the discretion of the chair. So we can do these guidelines to help make things easier. But every chair runs a meeting slightly differently, and Robert's rules understands that or recognizes that. When I'm not here, Commissioner Bernard or Commissioner Leininger will be in the chair position, and I don't expect them to run the meeting exactly the way I do. And that's the way it is. It always is with Robert's rules. It's quite different, not a lot different, but somewhat different under every chair.
Yeah, just thank you for that. I actually think that it would be really good to include in here, if we can. I hate to make this too weighty, but it might be good to include in here just something about, well, why can't we have a conversation with the commission, just to address that concern. So, and I think the other piece is that these guidelines provide, even though each chair will run a different kind of meeting, I think one of the good things about these guidelines is that it does provide some certainty and consistency to the public, that there is a framework, there are some guidelines that are consistent from meeting to meeting, regardless of who the chair is. Yeah.
Right. Okay, Commissioner Bernard.
Okay, first off, I think, I'm not going to do the back and forth either. So to answer your question, first thing I want you to know that there is no South Downtown Urban Renewal District. Never has. Hopefully someday there will be. Milwaukee does not have an urban renewal district, and you're welcome to look at that. If they did, I'm very happy for them, but they haven't told me that. Secondly, Bernard's Garage has been there since 1925. It has been rezoned countless times. And actually, in some of those times, I sat as mayor and recused myself from making those decisions or didn't respond to any of those. I've always believed that is, even though it's oftentimes has put Bernard's Garage at a disadvantage, it's certainly, that I've always believed that what the city needed was what the city needed. Secondly, an actual conflict of interest would be, and believe me, talked to many lawyers about this, is that the light rail would actually go across my property. It would take out, and somebody, Metro, would have to buy a piece of my property. The other is a potential conflict of interest. Now, this light rail line is actually east of the train line. It doesn't come near my property. It is close to it. And my potential conflict is no different than anybody else's in our community. I've always said, and you left early, so what, I hear light rail will destroy our community, and I hear light rail will make some of us richer. So which one is it? Is my value going to be decreased by the increased criminals that supposedly hop on light rail, or is it increased because the community grows and develops? Well, I hope that's true. I hope that's true for everybody who owns property in Milwaukee. I own this property and a home in Milwaukee, which I would love to have the value increased because I can't sell it for what I owe on it now. So that would be wonderful. And actually, there are many of us that have interest in someday developing, and I do. But I've not had a single person besides realtors come to me and say, well, Mr. Bernard, would you like to sell your business? Not a one. And so the potential conflict of interest is not something I actually have to declare when I make a decision. An actual one is, and a potential conflict in this case is no different than anybody else's. And you're welcome to go talk to a lawyer and ask. I certainly have. I have with our council here, and I have with the city council, and I actually had a complaint to the Secretary of State, which they threw out, and you're welcome to look at that, on whether I should vote for this. Secondly, or thirdly, or fourthly, light rail alignment already has been decided. What we're deciding today is to adhere to a decision by the commission to pay the $25 million. If the commission didn't vote for the $25 million, it would still go to Milwaukee. It would still stop right there. So how does that make a difference? And I'm not asking you. You're welcome to come back another time and talk, or I'd be happy to stick around and talk to you. Yeah, or I could meet with you. Okay. I'd be happy to meet with you. But believe me, this has been something that went, and you didn't go to all those 8 years of city council meetings, but this is an issue that has come up hundreds and hundreds of times. And appreciate the question. Thank you.
Commissioner Leininger.
Thank you. Let's see. One of the things that I have had a lot of questions about in the last couple of months, since I indicated that I'm not going to run to do another term on the Board of County Commissioners, is am I going to stay? And I through my term, and I feel like right now is a really important time for me to be clear that I plan to serve out my term on the Board of County Commissioners, and there are a couple of really key priorities that have been motivating my work here since I came on board that I want to really keep pushing forward, and those are getting the community back to work, helping people who are really fragile, making sure we have a strong safety net to help fragile people, and also increasing the effective financial oversight of operations in the county. And I have a couple of priorities within those. I'm just going to tell this very nice lady. She's the one person in the audience. I really strongly feel like urban renewal, which is a tool that has created thousands and thousands of jobs in the county and has helped us increase our assessed value. That's one of the things that government can do to create jobs, let the private sector create jobs, and make our community welcoming to new businesses. And so I'm going to keep working to come up with a way that our community can protect urban renewal as a tool and use it at appropriate places to help get the community back to work. I'm going to make sure that we find a way that doesn't involve a new source of urban renewal to fund our Portland-Milwaukee Light Rail commitment, because we've made that commitment, and we've also committed that it's not going to be funded through new sources of urban renewal. I'm going to work on helping launch the clinic in the Clackamas area, the 24-hour mental health crisis center drop-in, and move us forward in our addiction prevention and recovery work, because I really care about that, and also work on some fiscal oversight things. So I'm staying, and I'm going to be really busy pursuing the goals that have been animating my work throughout. So there's more to come. Thanks.
Okay. I wanted to report back on the MPAC meeting last night. So this is for mostly policy junkies and the rest of the commission. But the Metropolitan Policy Advisory Committee is the advisory that advises the Metro Council on land use issues, and they met last night. I'm sorry, Commissioner Savas isn't here because he is the alternate, but he wasn't there last night, so he missed it. We were advising the Metro Council on expansion of the urban growth boundary in 2011, cognizant of the fact that that there will likely not be another opportunity for expansion until 2016. Most of what was being proposed was in Washington County, about 2,500 acres and of residential, and about 300 or so in Clackamas County. MPAC had previously recommended about 500 acres of industrial, so that be brought in, and that was all in Washington County. The decision last night was to recommend to the Metro Council, and we are only an advisory body, not a deciding body, but was to recommend that they hold at the lower end of the middle range, which is around 1,600 acres, and try to get the best efficiency out of what they bring in, aiming for 20 units to the acre as an overall average. And and they did not. They chose not to decide on any particular area. So they have passed that decision back to Metro to determine where those specific acres would be, and added a few other principles like for their consideration, advised them, for instance, to consider proximity of residential to industrial and employment land, and to consider affordability factors for housing. So it was more a discussion of principles, and I know at study session we were frustrated because many of the specific requests had come so late in the last week or two that we were frustrated in not having the information to say this one over that one, and but so was everyone around the MPAC table, and that's the conclusion that they reached, that they were not in a position to decide one place over another, so they just advised on a range and have passed that back to the Metro Council. So that's where that stands, and I would expect them to make a decision by the end of the year. And with that, I just want to remind people also, having been a fire inspector in my past lives, October is also Fire Prevention Month. We didn't have any fire people here to tell us that, but it is Fire Prevention Month. Maybe they will be back. It isn't quite October yet, so we'll probably get one. But anyway, do be careful with fire, I'll remind people, and take advantage of the glorious weather. This is probably our last day in the 80s until next year. And with that, we are adjourned.